Hello there. So if you're anything like me and you buy your ingredients in bulk rather than per recipe, you'll quite often end up with bits and bobs left over here and there that end up sat in the freezer if it's hops, or at the bottom of the grain bucket or whatever it is that you've got. So this is one of those recipes where I just want to finish off a few things that are left over, kind of clear out a few of the little bits and pieces, packets of hops and grains that have been sat in the grain bucket for a bit too long. So yeah, it's a bit of a user up recipe. It's a West Coast IPA, and I've called it Barrel Scraper IPA because it's scraping the barrel on some of those leftovers that I've got. So let's have a look at the recipe and bit of brew day footage. So let's go. Right, so as I said, the main purpose of this recipe was to kill off a few odds and ends that I've got in the hop freezer. So we've got some Bravo hops, we've got some Calypso. I think both of those I actually bought originally for a Beavertown Gamma Ray clone, but I haven't used them since, and that beer didn't really come out that much like Gamma Ray, so I never ended up remaking it, but they should be quite good for an IPA. We've got some Simcoe. There's actually quite a lot of that, so that's not really going to finish that off, but at least it'll make a dent in it. And then I've got 50 grams of Citra from Get a Brew that I picked up at the BrewCon event. I'll put a link up to that again just in case you haven't watched it. Loads of freebies from that, so got to start working my way through those. So those are the hops that needed to go in, and obviously yeah, that combination kind of screamed APA or IPA, and in this case I want to do a West Coast IPA. I haven't done a kind of proper West Coast IPA for quite a while, and I'm kind of missing that nice punchy bitterness and you know, proper kind of it seems weird to say traditional American IPA because it's still such a you know, relatively new style, I suppose, certainly over here anyway, but yeah, more of a traditional West Coast IPA rather than the, you know, big hazy juicy more New England style stuff. So that's what we're looking at, and let's have a quick look at the recipe. Grains wise, I'm also trying to finish off a bag of Belgian Pilsner malt that I've had knocking around for a while. So that's the majority of the base malts. Well, that's pretty much all the base malt plus some Munich. Sounds a bit odd using a Belgian Pilsner malt for this, but a lot of American beers, they'll use 2-row, which is basically a very low colour ale malt. So Pilsner's not going to be that far off. Hopefully, we shall see. That remains to be seen. So we've got 5.5 kilos of Belgian Pilsner malt. We've got 650 grams of Munich malt, just to add a little bit of body and a bit more kind of bready flavour into the mix. And then we've got 250 grams of Cara malt, which is about 30 EBC. So that will just bring the colour up a smidgen and add a little bit of sweetness there as well. So that's the grain bill. Fairly simple. I like to keep the IPA grist very straightforward if I can. Don't really want too much going on there in terms of malt flavours, so let the hops shine basically. And then Bravo is the highest alpha one out of those that I've just mentioned hops wise. So we've got 25 grams of that in at 60 minutes, which is going to give us a good whack of the bitterness there. So that's 38 IBUs straight off the bat. And then at 10 minutes, another 10 grams of Bravo and 10 grams of Calypso. Then it's all Whirlpool hops, so 35 grams of Simcoe, 25 grams of Calypso, and 20 grams of the Citra. And then the rest of it will be going in as a dry hop for about 3 days. So we're going to be doing 60 grams of Simcoe, 30 grams of Citra, and then the remaining 20 grams of the Calypso. So that will finish off all of the Bravo, the Calypso and the Citra, and quite a bit of the Simcoe as well, though I think I'll have a lot of that left, but that's fine. So West Coast IPA, we want a really nice dry finish, again, to let the hops really shine through. So we're going for a fairly low mash temperature, 65 degrees. Going to be fermenting it with USO5 or the Cross My Loof version of that. I'll probably chuck 2 packets into this because it's fairly high OG, so it's 1065, 61 IBUs, and if it ferments down to 1012 it should come out around 7.1%, so a good strength American IPA as well. Yeah, that's about it. The only other thing to mention is water, starting with RO water as I normally do for this sort of beer. I'm going for a little bit more sulfate than I would normally use in a pale ale. So water wise, I'm adding gypsum, calcium chloride and Epsom salt to give me 97 parts per million calcium, 20 ppm magnesium, 245 sulfate and 48 chloride. So it's a sort of 5-to-1 sulfate to chloride balance, which if you're into water chemistry you'll know is supposed to give you that, you know, dryness and bitterness and promote the hop flavour a bit more, which is kind of what's recommended for especially these sorts of West Coast style IPAs. So that's the recipe. Yeah, hopefully it should come out all right. As I said, I'm kind of throwing the ingredients together a bit randomly because of what I've got left over, but I think that those hops should work quite nicely in combination for this style of beer. So let's do some brew footage and then see how it comes out at the end. Right folks, so there we have it, the Barrel Scraper IPA. Now just before we get into the beer, you might have noticed the channel is looking a little bit different on this video. So I've been making some changes to the software that I'm editing with, and there's a new logo that I've made up for the channel, and I'm also using on a few stickers and beer mats and things like that. So yeah, hope you like it. Let me know what you think in the comments below. That was partly down to me having a bit of an IT breakdown over Christmas that meant that I had to get a new computer, and I thought I'd take that opportunity to try and up my game a little bit on the just the presentation of the channel and stuff. So yeah, let me know what you think. But more importantly, let's get into this beer here. So you saw on the video there were a couple of things that didn't maybe quite go to plan. So first of all, the gravity was a bit short of target, and the beer didn't come out quite strong in the end, although it did drop down fairly low for the final gravity. So I've got 10.09 gravity, so it still came out 6.6%, which is still pretty respectable for a sort of American West Coast IPA, as far as I'm concerned anyway. And the transfer into the keg, you might have noticed I wasn't doing the usual closed transfer that I would, well, from in recent times always be doing for hoppy beers, particularly like this one. That wasn't because I didn't want to. I basically had loads of problems with the dip tube in the FV blocking up with the hops. Actually, it wasn't the dip tube itself, it was the disconnect going into the keg. So the line going into that kept blocking with hop debris. I did my usual routine of cold crashing. I've just put the hops in loose, and normally that's all right when I let a little bit of the trub and hops out of the dump tube at the bottom of the FV, but it didn't work this time. I think it might have been because I left it out on the side for a few hours before I came to transfer it, so maybe the beer warmed up a bit and that just sort of brought some of the hops back up into suspension. Anyway, it was a massive pain in the arse, so I had to abandon that eventually and just go back to the old-fashioned siphon tube and run it in off of that. So it was an open transfer. After that, I decided to throw in a little bit of sodium metabisulfite you only need a tiny pinch of that, and that is supposed to scrub oxygen out of the beer. So just to counteract any oxygen pickup during that transfer process, I added a pinch of that. I've got a big tub of it at the back here somewhere. So 500 grams of that, which I picked up for relatively cheap price, will last for ages. This is the same stuff that is used maybe more in winemaking, I think, for sterilisation of equipment. So yeah, hopefully that will remove any impact from any oxygen pickup during that process, but it should be fine. Going back to the OG, I think part of the problem with that was I did struggle for some reason, again I'm not sure entirely why, with the sparge on this one, so it didn't sparge through as easily as usual, which is odd because I use a mash bag in the mash tun and I do batch sparging, and normally that means I don't have any issues, particularly with this sort of beer, with the sparging process. But this one just seemed to be really thick and sticky for some reason. No idea why. Wasn't anything in the grain bill that should have caused that to happen. But yeah, it slowed down the sparge and transfer, and I just couldn't get it to drain through properly. I think I lost a little bit of efficiency through that as well. So it is what it is. The beers still come out okay, and there's no major ill effects from any of that as far as I can tell at this point. So let's have a look at what we've ended up with here. It's a nice kind of light golden strawy colour, still a bit of haze on it, so it had a fair amount of hops in there, so that's to be expected, and US-05 yeast, which does usually take a little while to drop clear if that's what you're after. I'm not that fussed for these sorts of beers anyway. I mean, out of the different IPA styles, if I did want them to drop clear, I guess West Coast IPA would be the one that maybe that kind of clearer appearance and potential crispness that you might get from that might be a benefit, but it's fine as it is. Although you can see at the bottom it is maybe starting to clear up a little bit. Good level of carbonation on it, and it's keeping that head because I've been chatting for ages and it's still there, so that's doing all right. On the aroma, it is lots of citrus, definitely kind of grapefruit rind aromas going on there. Quite piney as well, which I'm not surprised with the amount of Simcoe that was in it. That does tend to give, for me anyway, quite a piney kind of aroma and taste sometimes. Not massively pungent in terms of the aroma, but you can definitely tell that it's got those kind of IPA hops in there. So let's give it a taster. So straight away it does kind of tick a few of those boxes there for the sort of style that I was going for here. So West Coast IPA, definitely some piney kind of resinous flavour and mouthfeel there. It gives you that kind of slightly coated feeling on the inside of your mouth when you're drinking a beer or an IPA that's got a real, not just a high amount of hops in it, but also quite a high IBU or bitterness level. Again, there's kind of a lot of the traditional kind of American IPA flavours there. Citrus, grapefruity, quite bitter, nice tanginess to it. I get quite a bit of orange off of this as well. There's just a slight hint of that kind of grassy pine note on the back end as well. I really don't like those grassy flavours in beers if they're overpowering, but this is at a level which I can, actually still enjoy it. Yeah, it's certainly not becoming overpowering at this point. There's definitely some kind of sweeter maltiness coming through as well, so it was a fairly, it was supposed to be a fairly high OG beer, but didn't quite get to the level that I was expecting, but it's still got quite a bit of malt sweetness there to back it up, although it's not got too much of the kind of caramel sweetness that I think can become a little bit cloying sometimes if you overdo it in this sort of beer. So overall, I'm pretty pleased with that, to be honest. It's come out pretty much flavour and balance wise as I was kind of expecting based on the recipe that was produced. In terms of the hopping in there, again, for a load of stuff that I was just basically trying to use up, I'm quite happy with how it's come out. I'm not really 100% sure what the Calypso has brought to this beer. and I didn't really know what it did in the beer that I used it in previously, so I'm not doubt that I would go back and buy that one again. The Bravo hops work perfectly well as a bittering hop. Oh, here comes the rain. We're still not quite done with the storms over here in the UK at the moment, but hopefully they're on the way out. So what was I saying? So yeah, the Bravo, decent bittering hop, but it does seem to bring a little bit of that orange kind of tanginess as well later on when you add it in. And Simcoe and Citra is just a fairly classic combination for IPAs and beers in this style. So yeah, if I was going to do it again, I probably wouldn't bother buying Calypso to put into it. I might swap that out. Something that would, I think, definitely work well in this, particularly with the Simcoe and the Citra, would be some Amarillo maybe, and that would just add another layer of that kind of nice orangey citrus sort of flavour profile to it. So yeah, that'll do. Cheers.
I'm the dude, so that's what you call me, you know? That or his dudeness or duder or, you know, El Duderino if you're not into the whole brevity thing.